Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is make sure that all of the pattern pieces will fit on here. And I'm going to tell you, after I did all of my marking on my pattern earlier and did a dry run of where the fabric, the patterns are supposed to go on the fabric, I remembered that I had a shorter piece of fabric, and so that long length is not going to fit on here. Well, I don't want to make the short length, so I actually did a modification of my pattern and took a couple of inches out of the length so that I could still make the longer length. They're not as short as the regular shorts. They're about maybe about 3 or 4 inches longer than the regular shorts, but they're not as long as, they're like 3.5 inches longer than the regular shorts, but they're not going to be as long as the long shorts. I just don't have enough fabric for that, but I can do this and the pattern pieces will still get on there. So I'm going to slide that one over there pretty close to the edge. It's not on, I'm not cutting on the fold, but I can be pretty far over there. I just want to make sure that this upper corner is still on the fabric. And I might even put my pins there temporarily. And then I have this other one down here near the bottom, and that might be a little bit harder for you to see. I'm going to scoot this up. I have it down here at the bottom. And I know that my pattern down here is actually on the edge, and I'm over here to the side, and I am looking to see that my two pattern pieces in the middle are not overlapping. Okay? So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to move this back just a little bit because I need to grab my tape measure, and I am going to put these pattern pieces on with only the grain lines pinned. And I do that because I want to make sure I can get everything on, none of the cutting lines are hanging off of the fabric before I start pinning everything around. If you pin the whole thing on and then realize that you're about 1/2 inch off and the other one won't go on, you're going to get really frustrated. So I do a kind of dry run with my pins before I ever start really pinning. So to pin the grain line, you want to just start by putting one pin at the end of one end of the grain line. Okay? And I didn't measure anything at this point. I just know that my fabric is not hanging off the edge of the fabric, and it's actually a little bit in from the selvage. And then I'm going to take either a tape measure and measure from here to the side, or because this is a real short distance, I can actually use a seam gauge, and I put the end of the seam gauge on my line, and then I move my slider up so it's right even with the selvage. And then I'm going to come down here to the bottom, and I'm going to make sure that they are the same distance, okay? I want to make sure that both the top of the arrow and the bottom of the arrow are the same distance. And I didn't even look at the measurement. It's about 2.5 inches, but it really doesn't matter. It just has to be the same. So I'm going to put that pin in there. And in case you can't see that, I'm going to slide this just a little bit this way. Alrighty, so it's right here at the bottom edge of the arrow, and I have one at the top. Now, just so this doesn't wiggle around too much, and also because I have a corner over here that I'm kind of worried about, I'm actually going to put just one pin right there. Okay, and when I put my pins in, I want them to be totally inside the cutting line. No part of it sticks out past the cutting line. Alrighty. Now I'm actually going to fold this up so that I can get that other part of the pattern a little closer to me. And normally I would probably do this whole step standing up. It's a little easier to do, but if I were standing up, then I'd be leaning over the fabric and you couldn't see what I was doing. So I'm sitting down to do this. I'll tell you, standing up to do this stuff is a whole lot easier. All right, so I'm going to scoot my pattern over close to the edge. And I want to make sure that this upper corner right here where my shorts are going to be is not off the edge of the fabric. Okay, and it isn't. So I'm going to put my pin right there at the end of the arrow. And this time I'm going to measure to the fold, because the fold is also on the straight grain. It works just as well. So I'm going to reach in. I'm going to put this to the fold, not to the edge of the paper pattern. They happen to be about the same, but I want to make sure that it's touching the fold. And then I'm going to slide down here, and I'm going to wiggle my pattern around. So again, my seam gauge, the slider, is right there. And it's actually, I'm going to fold that back a little bit so I can see this a little bit better. I will unfold that when I get ready to cut. So now I know it's right on the folded edge, and I am going to put another pin down here. All right. So I have my two big pieces on, and now my next step would be to put the pockets on.